Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to Dan Lovenkrum, who is our Communications and Administrative Director here at Countryside. Anybody seen Dan before?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah? What do you know about him?
He's the director.
Director of something?
Did you know that?
It's on your paper.
Director of Administration and Communication at Countryside
So, remember what we talked about last time we were here?
2 weeks ago.
Sometimes we're such good friends and we have such fun that it leaves other people out, and
Yes, we had that.
we have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
Hey, good singing on that song.
Oh, thanks.
So, when we have guest speakers, I think it's good to like look at that person and not talk to each other anymore. So, anyways, welcome. Take it away. Dan's going to tell you his life story, and then you can all tell him your life story.
So hello, my name is Dan Lovenkrum. I am church administrator, so I always say that I take care of everything that doesn't preach or sing. But that's not everything, but so the spaces, the building, the finances, the office, the copy machine that printed the piece of paper that you have, all that type of stuff. That's part of my team here at Countryside. And we have, there's 3 or 4 people that work up in the church office, and they do finances and the communication pieces. And then we have an AV team that does the sound and video on Sunday mornings. We have Brian Palmer, who is our building coordinator, so he helps coordinate the janitorial services and things like that. And
Do you guys know Brian, who went on the hike last year?
This guy.
I know one person that knows, right? So that's the team that takes care of a lot of the stuff in the church. We have an accountant that takes care of all the books. And so that's what got me here. So how did I get to Countryside? I would probably go back quite a ways. And I got an engineering degree in engineering. And so I worked as an engineer for Motorola for about 15 years in Phoenix. And then I decided at one point that I wasn't going to do engineering anymore. I got my master's in international management and then became a yoga instructor. So this is just the highlight of where we've been. I'll go way back as to how this all started. And so I was a yoga instructor in Phoenix. I used to go to the church that Eric Elness was pastor at in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that's how I met Eric, and that's how I eventually got to Omaha. So I've been in a few different places. So I'll back way up, and I'll start with, I grew up in Minnesota, in a city called Dayton, Minnesota. Most people have never heard of Dayton but if I said Minneapolis, most people know where that is, and it's a suburb of Minneapolis. So I grew up with my brother and my sister and my mom and dad in a sort of a suburb of Minneapolis. And so I lived there I grew up there, went to college or school in Anoka High School, and then I graduated from high school. At that time, before I went to school, my dad had a brain aneurysm, and so I didn't start college right away, and I started about a quarter late and I went to a small school in northern Minnesota called Morris. It's a branch of the University of Minnesota called Morris. So that's where sort of part of my story starts. So for a long time in my life, I didn't know, I was struggling whether I was gay or not. And so I grew up in a very conservative home. Have anybody heard of the Assemblies of God churches? Anybody know anything about Assemblies of God? So on the spectrum of beliefs in churches, you have the United Church of Christ here, which is often considered a very progressive church. And then you have very fundamental churches on this side. And Assembly of God falls in the very fundamental side. So I grew up in a very conservative home. Has anybody heard of Mr. Rogers? And then anybody heard of the show called Zoom? Probably not. The back row. So Mr. Rogers would come on, Sesame Street would come on, Mr. Rogers would come on, and Zoom would come on next. And Zoom had music. How would you describe the music of Zoom? It was very 60s and sort of had a rockish, rollish vibe.
Funky.
A funky vibe to it. And as soon as my mom would hear that, she would tell us to shut it off because she thought that was too wild for her kids to be listening to. It was a children's program.
Devil music.
What? It was devil music. Exactly. So I would just, and this is when I was really young, I'd be listening to Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, and all of a sudden my mom would hear that music come on and she'd say, shut the TV off. So and then other examples are, I never saw a Star Wars movie until I got to college in 20s, and it came out when I was in about 10 years old, the first one. My family, we'd never watched a movie. Don't think I ever saw my dad watch a movie in a movie theater. My mom, the only one that I know that she watched was a Billy Graham sponsored movie. I'm just giving you a sort of background of how I grew up is.
Have you guys heard of the restriction on theaters, going to theater? Like in really conservative churches, it was considered a bad thing to go to the theaters because people would make out there.
And the movies weren't Christian movies,
right.
So you couldn't watch certain movies. So the only movie I saw was a movie with my neighbors as friends. I went with them to see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And that was really a long time ago. So I grew up in this environment. Music-wise, I listened to gospel. The only music we listened to in our house was gospel music. My first experience in more mainstream music was Prince and Raspberry Beret, and Born in the USA with Bruce Springsteen. And that was when I got my first job at a golf club. I was working as a busboy at a little cafe at the golf course. So I say all that because I just had a very conservative background from church going. I used to say we'd live at church because we'd go at 8 o'clock, go to Sunday school, go to church, come home, take a nap, eat dinner, and then go back to church again at night. And we did that and then we come on Wednesday nights. And sometimes we'd go to the nursing homes in between, and so we'd be there at church all day long. So I came from a very religious background environment. But I always questioned, in the back of my head, I always would ask God if He would give me a good male friend. And I never really understood what that meant until I realized that after a time that I was attracted to men. And so that was this beginning of feeling that I had some type of attraction to people of the same sex. But because I lived in a very conservative home, that was not even an option or even something I would consider might be even something that was true. And so one of the things I always say was praying the gay away, meaning that I prayed a lot that I would not be gay. And I would say that I prayed that many, 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 many times. And over time, once I got to, so this feeling that I was gay I started having this feeling more and more as I was finishing high school, and then went to college. I remember in my first college, I would go to the library stacks and go search out books that would help me understand what gay was all about. Is there other gay people? How do gay people meet? How do they live? All this type of stuff. And so, but I didn't know anybody gay. I didn't know anything. And so this was something that I didn't know quite what to do with. And so, but I continued living my life. So I went to college, got my engineering degree at University of Minnesota. In the meantime, I went to Texas for a summer job, came back to Minnesota, finished my last year of college, and then went to Phoenix for a summer job. Both of those times, I did meet a gay person, but there was no, it was one of those things that we were just friends and just came back home, and then I would say, I prayed the gay away. And then I would continue on. I then went to get my master's degree in Rochester, Minnesota. And at that time, that was the first time I actually dated a girl from Rochester area. And I dated her for about the year that I was out there. And when I moved back, that relationship ended, and that was when I realized that I was not attracted to women and that I was gay. So I accepted it sort of to myself, but I had not told anybody yet. So this is about age 24. A lot of people come out as gay as young as, some people 5 years old, they know it and they say it, but I didn't have any clue until I was into my 20s. A lot of it just was my background. So starting in, so I finished my master's degree, and then I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and that's where I started working for Motorola. I used to say that if you had a American-made car, that in the back 10, 15 years ago, I probably made the computer chips in that car. So we did manufacturing of computer chips. And I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the clean room or how they make computer chips, and the people are in these white gowns with only their eyes are showing. If you ever, I lived in a clean room for about 15 years. We made computer chips that did anti-lock brakes, anything that was safety related for your car, and it was a lot of technical stuff, but it was a lot of fun. And so that was what got me to Phoenix, Arizona. And so that I was there for about 6 years. I started going to a Assembly of God church in Chandler, Arizona, and I got involved with a group called Royal Rangers, which how many of you were Boy Scouts on this? Anybody Boy Scouts? So think of Boy Scouts, but then do Boy Scouts for Jesus, and that's what Royal Rangers was. So it was the same basic program of Boy Scouts, except it had a heavy influence about being saved and being a Christian and all that stuff. So I did that for about 6 years. At the same time, I was becoming more and more true to myself and recognizing that I was gay and was starting to meet other gay people in the Phoenix area and started dating some guys. At one point, I decided I could not go to that church any longer and be who I was, because that was frowned upon in that church, and if everybody found out, I didn't want to be had them telling me how to live my life. So I ended up leaving that church, and I started attending a all-gay church, which there are several churches in. There's a denomination called MCC, Metropolitan Community Churches, and those are they're usually made up of probably 85 to 90% gay people, because a lot of gay people feel that they've been rejected by the church. So they don't feel like they're comfortable, and there are a lot of church people have parents that have kicked them out of the house because they're gay. They've disowned them as gay, or the church has hurt them and told them they're not real people and made them to separate themselves from something that they was a real part of their life. And so that part of my struggle was, so I did a lot of things in church. I mean, I participated in church all my life, and then all of a sudden I was facing the fact that I would have to separate myself from God or being gay. There was like these two places, and I couldn't, as I was in college and stuff, I couldn't figure out how to do both. And so I had to come to the realization that God made me for who I was, and if God loved me so much and He made me have the feelings that I had, that I must be good. And so but that took a long time for me to do, because it was constantly, it's wrong, it's a sin, it's evil, I can't love another guy, because my church, my pastor, all tell me that it's wrong. But then I also knew that I loved God from as long as I've been in church, and knew that God loved me, and I had a personal relationship with God. And so I was constantly asking God, so why am I like this if it's wrong? And so I eventually kept asking that question, and God, the answer that always came back was, I made you who you are, and you're good enough the way you are. And so I got to the place where I was like, this is who I am. God made me this way, and I'm going to live my life this way, and be proud of it. So I always say that I came out and had my first beer about the same time, at age 32. So I say that because, again, my household there was no beer drinking. I never saw beer in my house for as long as I grew up. And so I never had any drink of alcohol until I was 32. And it was about the same time I came out and started telling other people that I was gay. So, around that age, in my early 30s, is when I started now talking, because I felt comfortable with myself. I started talking to my family. So I have a brother that's close, and I told him first, and then I waited probably about 5 years before I told my sister, because I was so fearful of their rejection. All I could hear is my sister, not wanting to be a part of my life at all. I was fearful of my mom not wanting to be a part of my life. I was fearful of my dad, but my dad eventually passed away shortly after I came out. So I say that to say that my biggest struggle of coming out was to my family, because I have it's not just my immediate family, my brother and sister and my mom. It is, I have 40 cousins on my dad's side, and I have 25 cousins on my mom's side. And on my dad's side, so this is just to give you a sort of idea of how heavily involved my family was in the churches I grew up in. My aunt on my dad's side eventually married the bishop of Assemblies of God. No, they eventually married the brother of the bishop of Assemblies of God. So to go against the church that I grew up with was heavily ingrained in my family, and so it was a big decision to try to come out to them and say something, because I was like, they're going to totally reject me. So I eventually told my brother, but before that, I met my husband, Mike Crump. So I was Dan Loven, and then we met in about, 22 years ago we met. And we met on nowadays you can get on your apps and meet people. Back then it was through the newspaper ads. And so I answered an ad of his, and we lived like only a mile away from each other in Phoenix. And we started dating, and so we've been together 22 years. So after I met him and we started living together, that's when I started telling my family. I told my brother, told my sister, but I didn't tell my mom because I was fearful I would break her heart. And so I didn't tell my mom till about halfway into our relationship. So I would a lot of times go home. At Christmas, we'd go to different families. I would go to my family, he would go to his family. But we had been together 10 years, but I could not figure out a way to tell my mom that who I was. So we eventually, but it was starting to get to a place where it was straining our relationship, because I could not take him to see my family, and I could go see his family, but he couldn't see my family. My husband Mike was heavily involved with a group called PFLAG. Does anybody know what PFLAG stands for? It's parents, family, and friends of lesbians and gays. It's an organization that was created by parents of gay children. That is a group that meets, and they actually meet here on the third Thursday of each month, And they are a place where a lot of families that find out that they have a gay child will come to those meetings to get support. So there are support meetings for parents and friends of people with gay children. And so Mike volunteered with that group for many years in Phoenix, and helped a lot of people work through a coming out process of being able to tell their parents, being able to help parents accept their kids, and build a healthy relationship within the families that were coming to those meetings. So the whole time Mike is here telling all these families how to help, or all these people how to help them come out to their families, and I was not even out to my mom. And so it became a strain on a relationship because I wasn't truthful to my mom as to who I was. And so eventually after about 10 years, I did tell my mom. It went as well as you might think it did. All my family, they all say they love me, but they don't accept who I am. So they believe it's a sin. They believe that I'm living in sin, and that that I need to be saved to be able to be a Christian. So it's always been a strength. So when I first took my husband Mike to visit Minnesota for the very first time, so this will give you an idea how that relationship was. My mom would not even let him come into the house. So we drove to the house. Mike was in the car. My mom came out of the house and just came to the window and said hi. And that was the extent of our meeting to come to my mom. My sister was a little bit more accepting, and so we were able to come to my sister's house, and my mom did come to the sister's house. But she didn't want us to come to her house because she was not accepting of our relationship. So that's an example of how relationships go with families, is that you don't. The biggest struggle I had was they said they still love me, but they wouldn't accept me. And so that was a hard thing. So eventually I got to a place where I was like, I'm not going back to Minnesota unless my husband, or Mike, he was my partner at the time, until they allowed us to, what was I going to say? They allowed us to come together. And so eventually they came around. And where am I with time? I don't know what
You're good. 7:04.
All right. So we started going back to Minnesota on Christmas, and it got more and more where they were. We came at Christmas time. We would stay in a hotel, and we'd just come over during the festivities, and then we'd go back to the hotel. But over time, my mom become more accepting of that, and we now stay at her house. The big question came in June. In June, let me get the date. June 26th of 2015 is when gay marriage became legal across the United States. And that was the day that me and Mike became engaged. And so we became engaged. Actually, we heard the news. We were on the phone, and he brought me and proposed to me up in the church office area. And so we were engaged, and a year later we became married. So we had been together for 20 years. So, but we became married for the first time in 2017. So when we celebrate, we always have two celebrations. We say we're married on June 25th, and we met on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th. And so one's 22 years and so I've been married 22 years. I've been together with Mike 22 years, and we've been married 2 years because it finally became legal. So we became engaged, and the question was, would my family come to my wedding? And so we put the invites out to my family, and they didn't answer. And so as the wedding got closer and closer, and I don't know if you know anything about weddings, usually you want to know 3 months, especially family, you want to know right away if they're coming. So we sent out the invitations, no answer. A month before, I asked, hey, are you guys coming? No, we don't really believe in this. We don't think that that's going to happen. And I actually came to a place and I said, I don't need you to come here and bless my marriage. I just need you to come and be part of my life. And so I did not know that they were coming to my wedding until 3 or 4 days before my wedding. They talked as a family and decided that they were going to love me and support me in whatever. And so they drove down the morning of the wedding and drove back that night. But they came to my wedding. Mike's family, Mike's got a different story. Is he has a sister that he has not talked to since he came out to her. That sister has a husband that whenever Mike's in their presence, talks and says that Mike is sinning and living a life of sin, and that's all he can talk about. And so Mike has not had any contact with one sister for about 30 years. All because they won't accept him for who he is. So I'm grateful that my family does still allow us to come. So we get back there every Christmas and a couple times a year to visit my family. There's still issues with, my brother and sister have issues with how they tell their own kids about our relationship, and I leave that to them. And so I don't know what those conversations are, but we do see them and interact with my nieces and nephews on that side. I yet to fully tell my dad's side, the 40 cousins, they have family reunions, and I have not come out to that whole group because that's another whole. And the reason I say that is it's a scary thing. Even at my age, and I still have concerns about how people think of me and how they react and all that. And I always have to come back to my relationship with God, and that I'm comfortable, and that God loves me and accepts me who I am, accepts Mike who he is, and our relationship, and that's what's good. And then other people need to have to come to terms with it on their own time. So that comes up to, because we got married 2 years ago, so now we're here, and we lived in Phoenix for 15, 16 years, and then we moved to Omaha, and we've been here for 7 years now. So that's sort of my story, who I am, how I came to Countryside. I started getting involved with the United Church of Christ because they were accepting, they're open and affirming, which means that they're accepting of people that identify themselves as gay and lesbian and transgender. So I said I went to an MCC church, which was 90% gay people. It's very easy to be gay in a church that everybody's gay. But the interesting part is the United Church of Christ are churches that are accepting, but don't make it like that's your whole life. And so it's nice to be part of a church that I can just come and I'm me. And the fact that I'm married to my husband is just a fact of life. And it doesn't identify me, it doesn't make me unique or special, but I can be a part of this community just the way I am. And so that's what that open or affirming designation on United Church of Christ churches means, is that they're open to anyone and everyone exactly where they're at. So I'll leave it at that and open up for questions. Or
have your parent or has your mom come any ways on her beliefs about it?
And I would say my mom prays for me every single day. And all I can say is I'm grateful for the prayers, because any prayers are good, but I don't know what she's asking for. But no, I don't think my brother or my sister are gonna ever say that I'm fully in communion with God because of the relationship, but they are at the place where they accept Mike. I was just talking to my sister, and she was asking about Mike, and and they were saying, she was like, I'm praying for Mike and for his health, not his anything else. And so they accept us and love us, but they probably will never fully believe that we're going to be right with God in the end.
Do you think if you grew up in a different family that it would have been easier to come out?
Some families, yes. I definitely think there's some people that have. I'll answer from the personally, yes. I think it depends on your family and relationships, but I'll answer it from a P-Flight standpoint, which is what I've heard of many stories. And even people that you might have that have parents that are the most lenient and liberal-minded, and they might even have gay friends that they have over to the house, and the parents have friends that are gay. Even then, there's many people that have trouble telling their parents that they're gay, because there's a lot of expectations around, that, because there's still a lot of people that in the world that it's not right. And so even if your parents are the most open-minded people, it can still be a big struggle. I just had on top of that the whole religious thing and fear. I would fear my mom was, well, she still does pray for me, but I mean, it was like that was all that was going to happen, was she was going to be praying for me all the time.
So it sounds like your community was your church family. I mean, your church was your community, and your family has to struggle with being not a part of that community if they would accept you on the more like spiritual level. Not, yes, we accept Mike, and we accept that that's your life, but So there's something to that, being a part of a group that makes it hard sometimes for families to.
And when you said community, so my mom's side, that was my community, was my mom's family, my 25 cousins, and we met as a family every month as a group. And so, and they're all in very religious beliefs too. So it was very hard to come out to all my cousins and just let them know. And I never actually said I'm coming out to them. It just was leaked through my family to them. And so, yeah, it's hard when you. And my wedding part was the biggest hurdle to get over, was whether you just love me for who I am, and even though I'm getting married, still love me. And the fact that they came, that showed that at least they could take that step.
Anybody else have questions? You held it in for a long time, or like you're wrestling with it for a while, questioning it, and then when you identified it, you kind of kept it.
I kept it in
for a long
for
time.
college so 24 to 32.
Yeah.
Did a lot. Probably 20 to 30 for 10 years. I probably did a lot of, okay, I'm going to own it, and then it'd be like, no, I'm going to pray it away. I'm going to, there's a constant back and forth as to how I was going to deal with it myself.
And you said as you grew up, you didn't even know that anyone could be gay? Is that basically, like, you thought you were an anomaly?
I like I said, at one time I told my mom, I said, can you pray for me to have a close guy friend? And that was the only indication that I had that, I look back at that, and that was me saying I wanted to be in a relationship with a guy, not just a friend. So, but no, I growing up, I had no clue, but my environment was not, nobody was allowed to be gay, I didn't know anybody that was gay, and I was so secluded, so I didn't see movies that had anybody portrayed as gay. I didn't, music was foreign. Everybody I interacted with was either my family or my church. So,
Do you
school
think as
was.
you met people, like when you talked about when you were older and you actually met other people, that is when it became easier? So had you had met them younger, do you think it would have been easier?
I think if I had started meeting people that came out, were coming out at a younger age that I met and knew they were gay, that would have been easier. Or the process would have started much sooner.
Right.
But my process didn't start until I was much older. And that's very common. You hear anybody my age or older, is a lot of people didn't come out until they were 20s, 30s, 40s.
How did you find out that being gay was a
Was what?
thing? How did you find out that being gay was a thing?
A thing?
Yeah. What did you find out?
Like I said, when I went to college, I started hearing things about gay people, and just because now once I got into high school, then you start hearing more of that stuff, and I was not so secluded because I saw movies and things like that. But my biggest way to learn was I was looking books up in the library. I remember, I can just picture me one time I had like a stack of 3 or 4 books that were about homosexuality and things, and I was pulling them off the shelves and tucking them under and finding the most secluded spot in the library racks and putting them there, and then I didn't dare put them back where they were, so I'd throw them into the return slots without anybody seeing me, and because it was so. And some of the stuff was not in the regular racks; they were in the restricted areas, and so I would go to the card files and look it up, and they'd say restricted, and I'd be like, okay, I can't go. I couldn't get. For myself, I couldn't go to the front desk and say, hey, I want this book. So I had to find the stuff that was in the regular library racks.
Do you ever regret not telling your like family like before you did, like earlier?
If I had to do it over again, I would have told them much sooner so that I would, because I lost a big chunk of my life that Mike and I could be coming to my family's house. So we probably spent at least the first 6 Christmases at separate places. And so, I would have done that totally different if I had. What I know now, I would come out and just be honest who I was. But fear was the biggest part of it. Losing my family, because that's all I knew growing up, and so fear of losing them was a big deal.
When people come out in school, do they get hassled? Do people insult each other by calling them people gay and stuff like that still?
Are you asking us?
Yeah.
Oh, not really. Like, not that I see or like a lot of us see. Usually, the only people who like tease them about it are like their actual friends.
Yeah.
Like, it's more of like a joking thing.
Some of you nodded. Do you have other experiences with people not being as accepting?
Well,
Yeah.
like, sometimes, like, calling someone gay is supposed to be, like, an offensive thing. So, that happens.
Yeah, or they like refer to like something as gay, like that's gay, and that's not. That just happens.
And I would say that was probably my biggest, where I probably first got the feeling that it was bad, was people would just say that's gay, or a derogatory term. They're just making a comment, but then I'd be like, well, I identify as that, so I must be bad. And so that is hard when people say it just sort of flippantly and there's a lot of terms we do that with. It's just a part of life, but then with one person that hears it and then they're going, but that's me, that hurts.
And your information from PFLAG about like that even in supportive families, it's still hard to come out. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to a PFLAG meeting, there's families there every week that just found out they have a child, or they're either a gay person going to PFLAG to hear from other parents how to come out to their parents, or there's parents that are coming that just found out their child is gay and how to deal with that. And it's that is a very common.
So I would imagine there's a bunch of people in your schools that are not coming out because they're afraid of the reaction. Right.
There's a club at Westside, and there are kids that are in it that haven't come out to their parents yet, and so they just have discussions about that kind of thing.
Huh.
It's kind of like, it's more accepting now, like at schools, I think.
Is it called a GSA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had none of that in my school. That was you'd hear after I graduated. I heard you kept hearing the stories. There would be this one school that had a GSA and all the troubles they had about getting that started. But now there's a lot more GSAs in most schools. There's some organization that's helping.
What does that stand for?
Yeah.
Gay Straight Alliance.
Any other questions you guys have? If you were starting a church, this is the person you would want to hire first. He makes everything happen at this church, and he does it in a passionate way and in a spiritually mature way, and he's always got this like business handle on the church, but he's also got this the mission of the church and what we're supposed to be doing to serve God and serve others, and it's a really great balance. So
Thank you.
yeah, number one, if you're starting a church.
So you can't have him.
Yeah.
Anybody starting a church soon?
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I thought you were starting a church, Lance.
What?
Urban Fund